Lucky break, huh? Vivian Morrow's voice cut through the crisp Chicago morning like the hiss of a blade through silk. Her eyes, icy, assessing, never left Zuri Adabio. Graduating top of her class. Imagine that. Her words dripped with civility, but the venom was unmistakable. Across the University of Chicago's grand courtyard, where sunlight danced over navy gowns and proud smiles, Zuri stood alone, radiant and unshaken. Her dark skin shimmered beneath the noonday sun. Her tightly coiled hair, swept into an elegant crown, framed the quiet fire in her eyes. She wasn't just a graduate. She was valedictorian, the first black woman in over a decade to earn the title at the law school. And to Vivian Morrow, that made her a target. Zuri felt the weight of the Morrow family's gaze long before their words arrived. Each comment veiled in sweetness, every smile concealing a question. How did a girl like her end up here? But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, is that Zuri had come armed. Her story wasn't one of luck. It was built from nights spent studying until her eyes burned, of working 2 jobs while mastering tort law, of turning every closed door into a battering ram. Her success wasn't a twist of fate. It was calculated, intentional, and unstoppable. Her speech cards rested in her pocket, pressed close to her heart. Justice, resistance, belonging. She'd written them for every girl who'd ever been underestimated, and every man who'd ever watched her walk into a room and doubted her right to be there. She was about to step on stage and tell the truth. But before the mic came them. Cale Morrow, her boyfriend, her piece, approached first, suit sharp, smile sincere. "You look like a revolution," he whispered, wrapping her in a scent of cedar and safety. She smiled. "Hope they're ready for one." Behind him came the dynasty. Vivian, hair like spun frost and eyes sharper than steel. Gerard, broad-shouldered and cold as glass. Camille, the sister, face flawless, voice full of sugar-laced daggers. Vivian's smile didn't touch her eyes. "Zuri, what a pleasure," she said, barely brushing fingers in greeting. "That dress, bold. Quite the choice." Zuri kept her smile tight. "I thought the day deserved color." Gerard's eyes scanned her like a resume he'd already decided to reject. "Cale says you're a hard worker. Law school's a beast. Must have been tough keeping up." Zuri met his gaze without blinking. "Topping the class takes more than keeping up. I built the pace." Camille's laugh was like a cough masked as a compliment. "Full ride, right? Well, some girls get all the fortune." Zuri's voice was calm, but her spine straightened like a blade. "Fortune didn't carry me here. I clawed my way up." They weren't listening. Not really. Their minds had already filed her under other. Too black. Too proud. Too present. As they turned to leave, Camille's whisper lingered behind her like smoke. "Valedictorian. Must have been some kind of advantage." The words pierced deep. Not because they hurt, but because they were familiar. She'd heard them in staff lounges, classrooms, scholarship interviews. Only this time, they came from the people tied to the man she loved. Cale squeezed her hand. "They'll come around." Zuri's eyes stayed fixed on the stage ahead. "Maybe. But until then, I'll be everything they said I couldn't." The crowd filtered into the auditorium like a tide, restless with celebration. Backstage, Zuri adjusted her gown, her bun poised like a crown forged in fire. The words of the Morrows still clung to her skin. Subtle cuts that hadn't drawn blood, but bruised something deeper. Her fingers tightened around the note cards. This wasn't just a speech. It was war in silk wrapping. She stepped into the wings, watching the sea of navy robes and proud families. The vaulted ceiling swallowed sound, but the weight of expectation was deafening. In the front row, Kyle sat beaming. Beside him, Vivian Morrow's cream dress was pressed and pristine. Gerard's arms folded. Camille's chin rested in her hand. They didn't clap when her name was called. They didn't need to. Their silence was its own message. Zuri inhaled, then stepped forward. "Zuri Adabio, the dean announced. Valedictorian, a scholar whose voice challenges and inspires. Applause rose, loud, honest, electric. Her heels struck the floor with purpose. The spotlight bathed her brown skin in gold. Her gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Kyle. He smiled, but his eyes darted to his mother. Again, she began, her voice clear, cutting. Today, we stand on the edge of justice, not as an institution, but as a promise. One we fight for, not inherit. She spoke of her parents, her mother's long hours at the library, her father's hands stained with oil and purpose. She told stories of being doubted, dismissed, disqualified by those who never bothered to know her. And still, she rose. The room leaned in. A professor nodded slowly. A student wiped a tear. But in the front row, Vivian's smile remained pinned like a brooch, polished but hollow. Camille whispered to Gerard, who gave a half shrug. Zuri saw it, felt it, and rose louder. Law isn't just precedent, it's rebellion. It's holding the line when others look away. It's making space for those who were never invited. The final line dropped like thunder. The room stood. Applause thundered. Zuri's chest burned, not with pride, but with proof. She stepped off stage, scanning for Kyle. He clapped hard, eyes shining. But behind him, the Maros remained seated. Vivian's purse clenched in her lap. Camille's eyes rolled, slow and deliberate. Zuri moved toward them, the weight of her gown nothing compared to what waited next. Then Vivian stood. Kale, let's get a photo, just us, by the podium. Her eyes slid past Zuri like she wasn't even there. Zuri froze. Kyle hesitated. Mom. Zuri should be in it. This is her moment. Vivian laughed, light and practiced. Of course, but we need one for the family album. I'm sure Zuri has friends she'll want photos with, Camille added. Yeah, study buddies or something. Zuri's fingers curled around her diploma case. She looked at Kyle. This isn't about a picture. It's about them pretending I don't exist. Kyle's voice was soft. It's just one photo, Zuri. We'll take more later. But Vivian was already pulling him away. Her arm linked with his like a claim. Gerard and Camille followed without a glance. A professor approached her, voice warm. Zuri, that was exceptional, truly. She nodded, her smile strained. Behind her, Vivian's voice carried, too loud to be accidental. She's articulate, I'll give her that. But it's all a bit idealistic, isn't it? Camille laughed. Exactly. Zuri stood still as the quad erupted in cameras and champagne. They clapped for her, but they still couldn't see her, and maybe neither could he. The chandelier above cast a soft gold over the Morrow family's curated world, but for Zuri, the light only sharpened the edges of every judgmental glance. Her bun sat firm atop her head, her plum dress catching the flicker of candles, quiet, defiant. The table buzzed with polite forks and polished smiles, but underneath it all, barbs lay hidden in crystal goblets and careful phrasing. Your speech was passionate, Vivian said smoothly, swirling her Chardonnay. Where did you grow up again? Somewhere vibrant? Zuri met her eyes. The word had teeth. Evston, a strong community. My parents made sure I understood hard work before I ever understood law. Camille barely looked up from her phone. Evston. Wow. So, from there to valedictorian? Unexpected. The silence that followed was meant to shrink her. Zuri held her fork steady. Hard work bridges any gap. I carved that path step by step. Gerard looked up from his steak. Public interest law, right? Noble. But doesn't pay much. Kale's used to a certain lifestyle. Zuri's stare didn't waver. I fight for people who have no one else to stand for them, Mr. Morrow. That's worth more than a salary. Kale supports that. She glanced toward Kale, waiting. He didn't speak. He just squeezed her hand. Softly. Wordlessly. Vivian's laugh came light and mocking. How admirable. But isn't it exhausting? All that heaviness? Zuri leaned in. Every case I take changes a life. That's the opposite of exhausting. That's purpose. Camille clicked her phone off and smiled sweetly. Sure. But still. Must be intense. Not exactly dinner party material. The room didn't flinch, just a slight shift in posture. Zuri exhaled slowly, her bun unshaken. I see people fight to keep their homes, keep their children. That's not intense. That's real life. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Camille blinked, her smirk wavering. Kale finally spoke. Zuri's making a difference. I'm proud of her. Zuri appreciated the words, but her fingers ached with restraint. What she needed wasn't pride. It was protection. Vivian's eyes narrowed. You mentioned a scholarship. Was that one of those diversity initiatives? The question stung. Zuri straightened. I earned my scholarship with top scores. I wasn't given anything. I took it. Gerard nodded. Impressive. They're generous with those, I hear. There it was again. Lucky break, dressed up in dinner language. Camille leaned back, folding her arms. Still. Must be hard. Always having to prove yourself. Not everyone sees you as valedictorian material. Zuri's fork tapped the plate. Just once. Then stillness. She looked at each of them. Camille's eyes full of challenge. Gerard's blank. Vivian's smug. And then Kale. Still. Silent. They weren't just doubting her resume. They were questioning her right to exist here. To love him. To be enough. Vivian dabbed her mouth, then said evenly, You're clearly driven. But Kale's future requires a certain alignment. I trust you understand. Her tone was calm, her meaning clear. You don't belong in this picture. Zuri's pulse thundered in her ears. Her jaw clenched, her bun held steady like armor. She opened her mouth, the words poised, measured, devastating, ready to strike with elegance. But just then, the server arrived with crème brûlée. A moment stolen, a war postponed. Zuri leaned back, her eyes still locked on Vivian. The dessert might have cooled the room, but inside, the fire had just begun. The chandelier glimmered overhead like a judge's gavel frozen mid-drop. Zuri stood center stage, not at a podium now, but at the heart of a reckoning. Her voice had just shattered the illusion of politeness that had blanketed the Morrow family's disdain. The dining room was silent, the kind of silence that demanded attention. Zuri's final words still echoed in the crystal and steel. I'm not here to fit your mold. I'm here to break it. Camille's smirk had crumbled. Gerard's fork lay abandoned. Vivian's wineglass quivered in her hand, the facade she wore now brittle and betraying cracks. But Zuri didn't flinch. Then, the one voice she'd been waiting for finally cut through the stillness. Enough. Kale's chair scraped backward as he rose. His voice wavered, but it burned. Zuri's the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. Brilliant, fearless, and she is my future. He turned to face the very people who'd raised him, who now tried to redraw the lines of his loyalty. You've judged her all night, and I let it happen. His jaw clenched. If you can't respect her, then you don't respect me. The blow landed. Vivian's protest died behind her clenched jaw. Camille looked down, the edge gone from her posture. Gerard's silence said what he couldn't. Zuri's heart pounded, not with fear but with clarity. She didn't need Kyle to rescue her. She needed him to choose. And he had. His hand found hers, strong, certain, a vow without words. Around them, the room shifted. Other guests leaned in, whispers surfacing like ripples in a courtroom gallery. The air now carried the scent of something new. Reckoning. But Zuri knew this moment, no matter how bold, wasn't the end. The Morrows weren't defeated. They were regrouping. Their silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. A tactical pause. Vivian slowly set down her glass. Her voice, when it returned, was soft but slicing. You've made your position clear. Kale didn't back down. I have. She nodded once, composed but stiff. Then let's enjoy what's left of the evening. Her smile returned, but it was hollow, paper thin. Zuri took her seat again, her spine a column of steel. The table resumed its orchestrated performance. Wine poured, dessert served, polite laughter attempted. But nothing felt the same. Kale stayed close, his hand never leaving hers. The Maros spoke little now, their control cracked by truth spoken aloud. As Zuri sipped water, her eyes scanned the rooftop skyline. The lights of Chicago blinked in the distance, messy, alive, and beautiful, just like her. She thought of the young black girls back in Evanston, watching someone like her rise and hold the room without apology. Thought of her parents who'd taught her to bend steel with grace. This dinner had been a battlefield, one they tried to dress in linen and chandeliers, but she saw it for what it was, a challenge to her existence, and her answer had been thunder. The check arrived. Camille didn't reach for it. Gerard stared through it. Vivian simply signed, her hands still, her mind somewhere already calculating the damage. Zuri stood once more, her head high, bun flawless. She had won the round. Not with anger, but with articulation. Not with rage, but with resolve. But she knew this was only the opening argument. The real case, the one about legacy, identity, and power, was just beginning. The chandelier's fading glow shimmered over crystal and linen, but Zuri stood untouched by its warmth. Around her, the wreckage of the evening lay in silence. Melted dessert, toppled egos, broken facades. Vivian's glass sat abandoned. Camille's voice, once sharp, was now a whisper. Gerard, the patriarch of a legacy, had nothing left to say. But Zuri. Zuri was incandescent. The air carried the scent of change, charged, undeniable. Her confrontation had ended one chapter, but something larger had just begun. She returned to her seat with calm precision. Her plum dress caught the last of the light, regal and uncompromising. Kale didn't let go of her hand, not now, not after the stand he'd finally taken. Around them, the other guests no longer whispered. They leaned in, they smiled, they approached. Ms. Adabio, congratulations. Kessler and Lane, that's no small thing. You've set the bar tonight. Zuri accepted their praise with quiet grace, but inside, she remained grounded. The validation she needed hadn't come from this room. It had come from within, long before the chandelier ever flickered. Camille was the first to try to rebuild. Zuri, I was wrong. You're incredible, and I'm sorry. Zuri studied her. No anger, no triumph, just clarity. Thank you, Camille. Words are a start. Actions will say more. Camille nodded, lips pressed together. For once, no defense. Just a beginning. Across the table, Vivian sat still, her poise unraveling in threads. Her empire of quiet control had been exposed, her polished dominance hollowed out by a young black woman she'd tried to erase. Zuri looked at her without flinching. You didn't ask who I was. You decided. That was your mistake. Vivian opened her mouth, but nothing came. Zuri didn't wait for an apology. She wasn't owed it. She had risen without their permission, and that truth now hung heavier than any apology could. Gerard muttered something about talking later, but even his voice had lost authority. There was no later, not on Zuri's terms. Then Elaine Carver passed by once more. She paused only briefly, her nod to Zuri carrying the weight of history behind it. You were seen tonight, she said simply. Zuri returned the nod. And I will continue to be. The dinner wound down, wine glasses emptied. The rooftop breeze picked up, soft against the edges of something permanent. Zuri rose with Kale beside her. He leaned in, voice low. I'm all in, Zuri. I'll prove it. Not just tonight. Every day after this. She looked up at him, searching. And this time, she didn't see fear. She saw conviction. Zuri's voice was quiet, but sure. Then walk with me. Not behind. Not ahead. With me. He nodded, eyes locked to hers. Always. The Maros remained seated as the room emptied. No more words, no final jabs. Their silence wasn't peace, it was a recalibration. But Zuri didn't need closure from them. She'd created her own. As they stepped onto the balcony, the skyline of Chicago stretched before them. Bold, endless. The wind tugged gently at her bun, but it didn't waver. She was Zuri Adabio. Lawyer. Warrior. No longer seeking a seat at anyone's table. She was building her own. The streets of Chicago pulsed with life, headlights streaming like stars over wet pavement. Zuri stood at the river's edge, the wind brushing her blazer, her jeans grounding her in the now. Her bun caught the halo of a street lamp. Still regal, still unshaken. It had been a month since the Luciel dinner, a storm dressed in crystal and linen. The Morrows had tested her, Kale had chosen her, and Zuri had risen. Now, the city wasn't just a backdrop, it was a canvas. She was painting something permanent. Kale stood beside her, his sweater soft against the chill, but his eyes steady. The guilt he'd carried had softened into growth. He no longer reached for her hand out of fear. He held it like purpose. Since that night, Zuri had stepped into her new role at Kessler and Lane. Senior associate. Fast-tracked to partner. Her calendar packed. Her voice heard in rooms where few looked like her. Just last week she'd argued for a community center's funding. And won. Her parents had watched the boardroom footage on a borrowed laptop. Their text after had been simple. "You shine, baby girl. Always have." Zuri's smile now was small, but unshakable. "You okay?" Kale asked. She nodded. "More than okay. I'm building something that's mine. With you. With this work." They walked in silence past old brick alleys and neon signs buzzing like memories. A jazz club welcomed them in. Low lighting, deeper voices. Inside, the hum of saxophone wrapped around them. Friends gathered at a corner table. Lawyers, designers, teachers, dreamers. Zuri slipped into the warmth. Her laugh, full, unguarded, cut through the music. Kale watched her like a man witnessing a sunrise that wouldn't burn out. Their world looked nothing like the Marrows, and that was the point. A message buzzed on her phone. "Camille. Can we talk again?" "I'm trying to understand." Zuri paused. She'd heard those words before. Camille had shown up to a legal forum talk, scribbled notes, asked difficult questions over a cautious coffee. Zuri had offered grace, but not shortcuts. She typed back, "Next week. Bring better questions." Camille's effort was fragile, but it was real. Even Gerard had reached out. Their lunch, formal, stiff, had cracked open when he said the words, "I misjudged you." No excuses, just space to begin. Vivian had written once. A note dressed in diplomacy, devoid of accountability. Zuri had read it twice, then let it go. Some people weren't meant to be part of the rebuild. Back at the table, Kale lifted his glass. "To Zuri," he said, his voice rising over the horn's slow wail. Unstoppable. The cheer that followed was raw, genuine. Zuri laughed, tipping her head back. Her bun caught the light like a crown forged from every battle she'd won. Later, the music slowed. Kale pulled her into the small space between tables. "We're building this," he whispered against her ear. "No one's stopping us." Zuri rested her head against his. She didn't need saving. She never had. But to be seen, chosen, respected, that was the gift. Their love wasn't built on rescue. It was built on resolve. Outside, the Chicago River shimmered in the night. Constant. Unapologetic. Like her. Zuri Adabio had not been accepted. She had taken her place, and she was just getting started.